I remember the bright summer days in Maplewood, where the sun seemed to pour gold into every corner of our quaint little town. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass, and laughter was always the soundtrack to our lives. Our home, a place that once felt like a fortress of happiness, buzzed with the sounds of my mother's bustling energy. Her laughter echoed through the halls like a sweet melody, making it impossible for anyone to be in a bad mood. I would catch her just in the kitchen sometimes, flour dusting her cheeks, hair tied up in a messy bun, and she would smile at me and say, "Ella, you should take a break. Life is meant to be enjoyed." But even then, I had responsibilities hovering over me like dark clouds. I worked 2 jobs, busting my back waiting tables at the diner in town and babysitting a neighbor's kids on the weekends, focused on setting aside every single dollar for my future. My mother would often tell me I was too serious, and maybe she'd have a point, but I didn't have the luxury of carefree summer days. Then everything changed the day we discovered the unexpected inheritance left by our late grandfather. The first shock hit me like a ton of bricks when the realization sunk in that I would have to share this windfall with my stepbrother. "Can you believe it?" he'd said to me, leaning back on our faded sofa, his wavy hair catching the light. $50,000 just waiting for us. He grinned, and I felt my stomach twist. His excitement was palpable, like a child opening presents on Christmas morning, and I couldn't understand why he seemed so thrilled. The reality of our recent fortune began to settle, heavy and cumbersome like a thick fog. I felt like I was tormented with the knowledge that the money would not be used wisely. Days passed, and what started out as small purchases by him soon morphed into something insatiable. The first masked itself as benign: a few new video games, a trendy pair of sneakers that tucked into our cramped living quarters like an oversized cat. "Look what I got," he said, showing off the glittery box that those sneakers came in. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I couldn't afford new shoes, let alone flashy ones. After all, I was struggling to pay my meager rent, dinner almost always consisting of instant noodles and frozen vegetables. "That's great," I managed to say, offer more mock enthusiasm than I actually felt. I could hear my mother's laughter from the kitchen, blissfully unaware of what was unwinding between us. As the days turned into weeks, his spending spiraled and my heart began to ache. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I was terrified but could not look away. A few paintball games with friends morphed into big trips to Lowe's Angels for exclusive events, and the next thing I knew, $50,000 had transformed into this lavish lifestyle he wore like armor. "I just got us VIP tickets to the summer festival. It is only $200 more," he shouted, eyes gleaming with delight. My fists clenched beneath the kitchen table as I forced a smile through gritted teeth, resisting the urge to scream that he was treating our family legacy like a toy, littering it with flash and chaos. "That sounds awesome," I replied, a hollow echo of my real thoughts which felt like knives twisting in my heart. How could he be so reckless? The lavish cars parked outside our house were like a grotesque parade of his newfound wealth. I could hardly believe it when I spotted that sleek red sports car that probably cost more than I made in a year parked there. "Isn't she a beauty?" he'd said, practically dancing as he twirled the keys around his finger. I reluctantly admitted, "It's shiny," hoping my disinterest would be apparent. Inside, I was seething. Every rev of that engine felt like a punch to my gut, reminding me of what it could have been, what it should have been, if our grandfather's legacy hadn't turned sour under his care. "Did you get that guy at the concert's number?" one of his friends asked, another kid who was all hype and no sense. I felt the air shift in that moment, a chill filling the warmth of our family home. His friends laughed, and their voices became a solid sound that muffled my own thoughts. I could barely recall the last time I felt that kind of joy. Perhaps it was a distant memory, buried beneath responsibilities and reality. But here he was, my stepbrother parading around like a king, flaunting our joint treasure in his over-the-top lifestyle while I worked late shifts, saving every tip I got to pay my rent. I could feel my anger boiling just beneath the surface, surging with a ferocity that startled me. Did he even care? Did he recognize the sacrifices I had made, the late nights spent working, multitasking, and shuffling papers while he treated the money like a fountain of endless joy? "Mom." I wanted to shout, wanting to peel back the veil of this distorted vision. Mom was in the kitchen. I could hear the pots clanging, her humming as she whipped up something fragrant and delicious. She always had her back turned to us whenever things turned dark, seemingly lost in her own world. Perhaps she believed everything was perfect. "Mom, you need to talk to him." But what would it matter? She was so wrapped up in the careful illusion of perfect days that she would dismiss my concerns as jealousy. I could already hear her comforting voice say, "Honey, he's just enjoying life. You should too." Then came that one fateful evening. The smell of something baked wafted through the house, curling around my senses and drawing me into the kitchen where my mother stood. I leaned against the doorway, watching her sprinkle powdered sugar over a batch of cookies like she was dusting the oppressive clouds from a blue sky. Her laughter floated through the air, and I enjoyed the moment, forgetting for a heartbeat about the anger bubbling within me. "Hey, Mom," I said, my tone lighter than it had been lately. "What do you think of his spending?" Her laughter tickled the air, and I watched her hands keep at their work. "Oh, you know how boys are, they just love to splurge. But $50,000, I pushed, heart beating in uneven rhythms. "It's not just a toy here, that's our inheritance." She turned, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Ella, are you sure you're not reading too much into this? Maybe he just wants to enjoy life after losing Grandpa. It can be a tough time for him." I could see so clearly now that her perceptions came from a place of love and protection, a refusal to see that her little boy was spiraling into a storm fueled by foolishness and the thrill of lavish living. "Mom," I started, but every sound became muffled in my throat, feelings lodged tight and painful. "We both have a future to think about." Suddenly, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I turned sharply, hands clenched into fists at my sides, taking in the house that saw so much joy but was now teetering at the edge of a cliff made of broken dreams. Was it possible to fight this battle on my own? I had no idea how I could make them see the truth. My heart burned with unbearable anger as I watched him flaunt his purchases, his lifestyle a showpiece of everything wrong with a world that felt perfectly painted on the outside but hideously hollow inside. Once again, the laughter echoed down the halls, a haunting memory of the way things used to be. I think he believed that I couldn't hear his friends exclaim about the parties and the glamorous life they were now leading. I wanted to shake them, to hold him accountable. Did he even realize he was dragging our family's legacy into the mud? With every purchase, my frustration swelled into something I could no longer contain, urgency gnawing at my insides like a rabid animal. This thief was treating our family legacy like a toy, and I felt like a spectator in a comedy I couldn't laugh at, a play twisting into tragedy right before my eyes, and I was tired of being silent. How long before I snapped? I needed a plan, something that would tug at the threads of this perfect illusion, unraveling the farce that had taken over our lives. I wanted to confront him, don't get me wrong, but how? I had to find a way to make him share my vision. Only then could I show my family the truth hidden beneath the layers of deceit and bad decisions. The debts he was racking up in our mother's name were a ticking time bomb, and I planned to defuse it before it blew up in our faces. I would not allow my family's perfect illusion to continue, not while this thief thrived on our heritage like it was his own playground. I needed to act. It was time to teach him the true value of what had been left to us every day. As I scrolled through photos on social media, I could see my stepbrother's latest extravagant party plastered across the screens of those who were, perhaps not so innocently, chronicling his shameless displays of wealth. I felt the weight of each glimmering image, each flashy invitation sent out like a war cry. It gnawed at me, a restless itch beneath my skin, awakening a mixture of anger and worry I could hardly pacify. I'd turn away from my phone, glancing around our modest living room with its faded couch and decades-old carpet, and that discomfort grew sharper. I was trudging along this tightrope between my truth and the facade the world saw. The noise of the raucous laughter and music from his gatherings seeped through the walls of our home, mocking me as I tried to focus on my daily routines that kept me grounded. Then there were the bills. I remember the distinct moment I stumbled upon those mountain-like piles in our mother's room, dusty and uncaring beneath the rush of playfully unkempt life. They were strewn haphazardly atop her nightstand, like rocks tossed aside from a weary traveler's path. Bills from utility companies, notices demanding payment, reminders of debts that clawed and scraped at the edges of our lives. Soon after finding them, my heart began to race. I could feel the adrenaline spike through my veins while I rifled through them, each new envelope bringing forth a feeling of dread that wrapped itself around my throat. It was overwhelming to think about. All of it sat with my mother, like a secret that she hadn't let me in on. I found her sitting at the kitchen table when the confrontation took shape. I had just spent another exhausting day at work, and there was no way I could fake my usual cheerfulness. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to choose my words carefully. "Mom," I said, picking at the edge of one of the wooden kitchen chairs, "I found some bills in your room. Why haven't you opened them?" My voice wavered between genuine concern and something sharper, a prickle of anger boiling beneath the surface. She glanced up, her eyes clouded with confusion. "Bills? Oh, sweetie, those are just some papers I need to get around to," she said, waving a hand dismissively. Her gaze darted back to the stack of magazines on the table as if that somehow she could remove her unease with a flimsy distraction. I took a deep breath, stifling a rising wave of frustration. "Mom, these are overdue notices," I pressed on, trying to match her nonchalance with earnestness. "We can't just ignore this. We need to address it." She sighed, the weight of her tiredness infusing the air around us. "It's nothing really, just some part of managing the estate." Her words dripped with a forced lightness that echoed of a half-hearted truth. I could see strain-etching lines around her mouth, a frown barely concealed beneath her smile. "Managing the estate? We have to take care of it properly before things get worse." I encouraged her, my voice edging higher with anxiety. "Ella," she began, but I had already turned away, shaking my head as I stomped back towards my room. I could not comprehend her tendency to brush things off. There was too much at stake. The bills were just the surface. They were a glimpse of something much deeper and dreadfully concealed. I needed to find out what was happening. As soon as I crossed the threshold of my room, a series of questions began to swirl through my mind. Was my stepbrother at the root of this? He had always been a reckless character, one who took joy in thumbing his nose at the rules. I'd seen him gamble at our local pool hall, tossing away money as if it were nothing. The more I ruminated, the more pieces of a sinister puzzle began to click into place. It took only a handful of intentions and calculated moves for me to begin a quiet investigation. I kept a journal where I noted each observation, each behavior that troubled me. I logged late-night phone calls overheard when the house was supposed to be quiet, the way he'd slide cash into his pocket with a casual shrug, as if he were hiding candy rather than gambling money. It was clear he had grown comfortable with his game, the extravagance of his lifestyle breathing life into shadows that stretched farther than I could have ever anticipated. Late one evening, I found myself crouched on the edge of my bed, scrolling through social media. I needed more evidence. I could see pictures of my stepbrother laughing with friends, champagne flutes raised high, faces blurred and indistinguishable against the backdrop of an expensive mansion that would drown a small town in its wealth. Yet something else caught my eye, a logo on one of the fluted glasses couched beside a table teeming with poker chips. My breath hitched. It was a local underground gambling club I had heard whispers about. It was the type of place frequented by individuals desperate for a quick high or an escape from their current realities. The night grew older as I pieced together what I'd learned. Days faded into weeks, and my observations spiraled deeper down a rabbit hole of dirty secrets. I uncovered his creditors, the menacing whispers from the underground world, and a haunting web of debts that twisted around my family's inheritance like a snake constricting its prey. I could sense time running out. My stepbrother's charm and good looks seemed to blind everyone around him. I remember a day when he had wrapped his arm around our mother while showcasing yet another designer watch, a gift he had bought with what, in reality, were our mother's own savings going up in smoke. I could see her eyes gleam with pride as he spun tales of success, unknowingly aiding his self-destruction while he cradled her dreams like fragile glass. Each day that passed in painful silence felt like a countdown, a gnawing fear keeping me awake at night. I could not shake the thought of my mother believing in him, believing his lies that entangled our lives in a corrosive bond. I felt torn, a fight simmering inside me, between preserving her innocence and confronting the reality that my stepbrother's actions were not just reckless. They pushed us all closer to the brink of financial ruin. One afternoon, during a brief moment at the dinner table, I tried to find the courage to speak up about it all. I looked at my stepbrother who sat across from me, his confidence radiating from him like an unsettling aura. "How can you afford all these parties?" I asked, the words slipping from my lips before I could think them through. His eyes narrowed almost immediately, tongue flicking across his lips in that confident way that had always put me on edge. "A little charm goes a long way, you know." He shot back, smirking. "Charm doesn't pay the bills," I countered, my discomfort now spilling into burning anger. "You are not some sort of independent millionaire. You are just living off our inheritance like it is endless. You need to stop this. It's reckless." I could see my mother stiffen, her fork halting midair, wide eyes darting between us like a ping-pong ball caught in an ongoing back and forth. "What are you talking about, Ella?" she asked, faltering, her laughter abruptly quieted. He is gambling away money that should be ours. You have to believe me." My heart rushed beneath my ribcage, pounding with urgency as I struggled to present the evidence of my silent suffering, my attempts at guarding our family's future against a brother who played the role of the golden child without remorse. The strained silence thickened around my words like a looming thunderstorm, waiting to burst. I could see my stepbrother, his expression morphing from anger to something cooler and more calculative. "It's really not necessary, Ella. You have to relax. Life is too short," he said, his voice smooth like silk, but coated with something ice cold. It was frightening how completely he could disguise the truth, how capable he was at dismissing my concerns with a flick of his wrist. Here he was, infusing charm into danger, wrapping deceit in warm laughter that ensnared all of us. And my mother, standing there, unsure and bewildered, clinging to her unrealistic views of familial ties and love, while the truth lay structured beneath layers of his manipulative kindness. Yet that storm bubbling inside me began to escalate, a rebellious flame igniting against the backdrop of this twisted inheritance game. I did not know how or when, but I knew, no matter the consequences, I would have to take matters into my own hands. I could not afford to sit by and watch as my mother's trust was misled, and our lives slipped deeper into the darkness of their complex web. The fight against his reckless charm may have been brutally uphill, but love would be the weapon I wielded to protect what remained of our fragile family. Time was slipping away, but I was ready to meet the challenge head-on. The rain poured steadily outside, a relentless symphony of nature that matched the tempest brewing inside me. I could hear the water pelting against the roof, a desperate beat echoing my heart. As I stood in the dimly lit hallway, the sound of the doorbell sliced through the air like a razor. My mother hesitated for a second, glancing at me, her eyes wide with an unspoken question. I could only shrug in response, my stomach twisting in knots. When she opened the door, the 3 police officers on our doorstep looked so out of place in their uniforms, like dark clouds imposing on a sunny day. The tallest one spoke first, adjusting his cap as if to signify the seriousness of his intent. "Good evening, ma'am. We are looking for your son," he said, his voice steady, respectful, but firm. Instinctively, I held my breath, feeling a familiar sense of dread claw its way up my throat. Mother's cheeks flushed, confusion evident in her furrowed brow. "My son? You must mean my stepson. Your stepson, yes, his name." The officer interjected smoothly, but it felt like more than just an inquiry. It was an accusation hanging in the air. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "What does he need to do with the police?" I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying my anxiety. The officer turned to me, his piercing gaze studying my face, almost as if weighing my reaction. "We have received complaints about rowdy parties and unpaid debts. We need to talk to him." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the familiar anger bubbling just beneath the surface. My stepson had been throwing parties long before now, parties that turned our house into a chaotic scene of loud music, clinking bottles, and obnoxious laughter invading our home. The very thought of it made my skin crawl. I could see my mother's face pale, the confusion transforming into worry. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice shaky. "He is not a criminal." I loved my mother deeply, but part of me wanted to shake her, to wake her from this dream where everything seemed fine while I watched it spiral out of control. "No one's saying he is, but the evidence is piling up, don't you see?" I couldn't stop myself from interjecting, the frustration spilling over. "He is not living here responsibly. He is hurting us all." As I spoke, the door creaked open wider, revealing my stepson in the living room. He sauntered towards us, cocky as ever, a wide grin stretched across his face. His friends lingered behind him, casting nervous glances at the officers. "Hey, what's all this? Did I miss a party?" he asked, his tone dripping with faux charm. The world around me seemed to slow down at that moment. The tallest officer cleared his throat, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "We are looking for you, sir," he said, the word sir feeling sarcastic in that context. "I think it is time we had a chat." "What's the problem?" he replied, shrugging off the gravity of the situation. "I haven't done anything wrong." His light-hearted dismissal of the officers only infuriated me more, the laughter ripping through me like a serrated knife. "Stop it," I blurted out, unable to contain myself any longer. "This is serious. You have no idea how many times I've tried to protect you." He turned to me, his eyebrow raised. "Protect me? Ella, please." He threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing around the small hallway, making nausea swirl in my stomach. I didn't ask for your help. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of bemusement and concern. It embarrassed me that they were witnessing this pathetic spectacle of a family so torn apart by one person's reckless behavior. The laughter felt even crueler when I glanced at my mother's stricken face, eyes darting between her son and me, desperately seeking an explanation. "Help me? You're ruining our family," I hissed, my voice trembling as I fought back tears. "You are drowning us and you keep acting like it does not matter. You're a disaster." I could feel the weight of anger pushing me further, fueling the fire in my chest. With each word, I saw his facade crack. The laughter faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation that momentarily broke through his charm. "Calm down, will you? It's not that big of a deal." The officers advanced, one of them stepping closer. "It is a big deal, young man. We need to speak with you about your activities, and your friends will need to leave. Now." An awkward silence enveloped us. My stepson glanced back at his friends with a touch of uncertainty. "Hey guys, can you wait for me outside?" There was a false bravado in his voice, but his confidence wavered under the weight of the flashing blue lights outside, the rain pouring down unrepentantly. As his friends slowly filtered out of the house, I felt a sense of solitude wrap around us like heavy fog. I stood there, wrestling with the truth that had been gnawing at my insides for far too long, while my stepbrother sought to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. "Do you even hear yourself?" I whispered, my voice a tremor of rage and sorrow. "Do you even understand how much damage you are causing?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and the mask of indifference slipped just enough for me to see the boy I had thought I knew, hidden beneath layers of bravado and ignorance. "I'm just being who I am. It's not my fault you don't like it." I felt a rush of pain at those words, a deep ache bursting within me. "You think this is about liking you? I've loved you like a brother, and now I feel like I am losing everything because you don't care." Tears streamed down my face, each drop fueled by years of frustration and helplessness. He rolled his eyes, trying to shake off the weight of my confession. "You care too much, Ella, that's the problem." "Maybe I care enough for both of us," I shot back, my voice raw and jagged, "but it is useless because you refuse to see it." "I don't need your judgment," he replied, crossing his arms defensively. "I'm not asking for you to be my moral compass. I do what I want." "Fine," I said, biting back a sob, "but when this all comes crashing down, when you lose everything, don't expect me to pick up the pieces again." His laughter returned, mocking and chilling. "Oh, please, don't act so dramatic. I'll be fine." He tossed his head back, dismissing my anguish like it was an insignificant speck of dust. In that moment, I realized that nothing I said would penetrate the wall he had built around himself. I felt the cold realization wash over me. Who was I to think I could change him? I blinked, wiping away tears, my heart racing with fresh fury. He stood there, impervious to the wreckage his actions created, while I felt the last remnants of patience slip through my fingers like grains of sand. "Maybe you could try being a brother for once instead of a self-absorbed fool," I said, my voice pained but steady. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, each beat echoing like a drum roll, signaling the end of our fragile connection. His smile faded then, and a flicker of uncertainty echoed in his eyes. "Ella, that's not fair," he said softly, almost pleading, but it felt too late. The chasm between us had grown too deep to reverse. As the officers continued to stand behind him, waiting for his compliance, I felt a pang of despair wash over me. "I used to believe in you, but you have made it impossible." My voice was a whisper, barely audible over the storm outside. "Nobody asked you to believe in me," he said, his demeanor hardening again. The world around us blurred as I realized the truth. This moment of confrontation was the moment of reckoning. I could no longer allow myself to drown in his choices. The rain outside poured heavier now, drowning out every last shred of hope I had clung to for so long. The waning sunlight of the late afternoon spilled through the windows, casting long shadows and highlighting the imperfections on the dining table where I had prepared everything for the family gathering. Although the sun was setting, the flickering anticipation within me burned bright. As I carefully arranged the plates and glasses, I felt a nervous excitement bubble beneath the surface like a tightly coiled spring ready to unleash itself. This gathering would serve a purpose greater than mere familial connections. It was time for the truth, a truth I had crafted with painstaking effort over the past week. I had enlisted the help of my youngest uncle, who had always had a knack for playing the peacemaker, and my supportive sister, who had been just as frustrated as I was with how our stepbrother had spun our family's happiness into a chaotic whirlwind of debts and deceit. Both of them had offered to help me tackle this delicate endeavor. The two of them slipped in and out of the kitchen, preparing platters of food and arranging drinks, but I could feel their eyes on me, heavy with expectation. "Ella, are you sure about this? I mean, revealing everything in front of everyone?" my sister asked as she whisked together a bright salad dressing. She paused, her brow knitted with concern. "I have to," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my heart. I poured my thoughts into the air, as solid and sharp as the knives glinting on the counter. He cannot keep spinning his web of lies. It is not just about him anymore. It is about protecting everyone he has hurt. My uncle nodded, setting a stack of plates down with a determined clank. "You have to do what is right. This is your chance to set it all straight, to make everyone see for themselves." He shot me an encouraging smile, and I felt a surge of validation wash over me. I took a deep breath and admired the organized chaos around me. I had meticulously gathered evidence over the last week, collecting screenshots of messages and compiling stories that painted a picture too vivid to ignore. There were tales from friends left devastated by his reckless need for gambling, one of whom had literally lost a small fortune, money that was to fund their sick child's medical treatments. Then there were the accounts of extravagant spending, his love for gambling morphing into a dangerous addiction. I shook my head, reliving the rage I felt as I pieced together his patterns. How could anyone be so irresponsible? No matter how much I wanted to avoid confrontation, the escalating severity of his actions left me no choice. The doorbell chimed, breaking me from my thoughts, and as if on cue, a wave of nerves cascaded through my stomach. My uncle hurried to greet the arriving family, and moments later, laughter filtered through the air as voices filled the living space. "Ella, my dear," one of my aunts exclaimed, hugging me tightly as she entered. There was an air of warmth and safety in her embrace, a short-lived comfort that diluted under the weight of my resolve. Smells good in here," another family member chimed, grabbing food and throwing my beloved dishes into a frenzy of noise, laughter, and commotion as the room filled with murmured greetings. I stayed quiet amidst the clamor, my heart racing. Each face brought back memories of happier days, when family gatherings meant warmth and comfort, not hidden betrayals and gnashing of teeth. I set the table, my hands moving instinctively, while I listened to the chatter and exchanged pleasantries. Expectations of joy danced around while I felt like a dark cloud lurking in the background. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, everyone settled into their seats. I exchanged glances with my sister, who nodded in recognition of the gravity of what was coming. The chatter began to quiet, anticipation building as I finally cleared my throat and summoned what little courage I had left. "Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "but there is something I need to share that cannot wait any longer." The room fell silent, and my family turned their attention to me, expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. I could feel the weight of their gazes, heavy with unspoken fears. Most of you have witnessed how our stepbrother has transformed over the last few months. His charm may have once made you overlook warning signs, but all that glitters is not gold. I paused, my fingers gripping the edge of the table as I felt the thrum of adrenaline surge through my body. The truth is far darker than the facade he has put on. He has developed a serious gambling problem, and I can no longer stand by and let it destroy our family from within. Gasps punctuated the room, and I pressed forward, fueled by the necessity for truth. "I gathered evidence, and I need you all to see what he has hidden." I pulled up my phone, flicking through the screenshots that laid bare his recklessness. This is the conversation he had with a friend who lent him money. He promised to pay it back, but I started scrolling through the messages, each word feeling like a dagger aimed at the heart of our family bond. "Look, he's asking for more money to pay off some debt caused by his loss at the casino." Forced laughter filled the air when an uncomfortable silence threatened to engulf the room, but I pressed on, determined. His gambling addiction has spiraled out of control. This week alone, he spent thousands on luxurious dinners that he cannot afford, I shouted, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and purpose. "And our mother has no idea. None of you do. This is not the same person we've known. You cannot be serious." "It cannot be that bad," one of my aunts protested, disbelief painting her features. I continued, presenting a series of stories and evidence in a methodical manner. "Look at this," I said, pointing at a particular message on my screen. A friend of mine lost their entire life savings to him last week. We trusted him, and there's more. He's racked up debts, lies, and excuses at every turn. He's always been a bit reckless, but gambling. Another family member murmured, the seeds of doubt beginning to unfurl. I felt a surge of power coursing through me, emboldened by the truth I was unveiling. He's not just playing games, he is destroying lives and tearing apart ours. Just last month, he begged for money from Mom, and she gave it to him without asking why. How could we let this go on any longer? As my words settled like heavy stones, a shift rippled through the gathering, and I could feel the tide of realization washing over everyone. The horrified expressions on their faces, one of disbelief, horror, and then perhaps understanding, were intoxicating. I turned to our mother who, for the first time during my revelation, sat in utter silence, eyes wide and disbelieving. Her face morphed from confusion to realization, like an actor slipping into character with the weight of truth pressing against her ribcage. I stepped closer, my heart racing as I delved deeper. Mom, he has been using you, us, all of us. We believed he had everything under control, but everything is crumbling. My voice softened. You deserve better than this, we all do. Finally, she looked away from me, her gaze drifting to nothingness, as if the weight of my words had stripped the world of any vibrant color. The air grew thick with uncomfortableness as she began to grasp the avalanche of broken trust rushing towards her. Tell me it isn't true, she whispered, her voice tremulous as if the very words could summon a denial. I wish it wasn't, but these are just his latest misdeeds. I gestured around the room, watching as every face transformed with resolution, shades of astonishment and fear mingling in a dangerous dance of disbelief. Mom, I continued, desperation creeping into my tone, this is a chance for you to see him for who he truly is and stand with us as a family to rebuild our trust. You have no idea what you are talking about, he suddenly thundered from nowhere, the door creaking open behind him, revealing him like a ghost emerging from the shadows. I braced myself for the confrontation, his smooth exterior shattered, replaced by a veneer of arrogance. My heart raced, the familiar bitterness curling in my stomach. You're lying, Ella. You are just trying to tarnish my reputation. Look around, everyone loves me. They won't believe your fabricated nonsense. But I had him on the ropes, he was trapped, and I could feel the weight of the room turn against him. Your reputation? I scoffed, barely able to contain the rage boiling beneath the surface. Your so-called reputation is nothing but smoke and mirrors, an illusion built on the pain you have inflicted on others without a second thought. I do not know what you are talking about, he fired back, panic crawling across his features. You are just jealous because I live a better life. A laugh bubbled from my sister, filled with disbelief. Better at what cost? You are losing everything and everyone you love with your reckless decisions. Look at Mom, you are destroying her bit by bit. His eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but the condemnation was palpable, and he had nowhere to hide. I felt the tension mount, a storm rising on the horizon of our broken family. Our mother deserves to know the truth, and we deserve to heal, I said, my voice resolute as silence fell heavy again. The din of gasps had evolved into a thunderous tide of realization that swirled around him, isolating him like a lone ship facing a tempest. I'll fix it, he stammered, but the words rang hollow, laced with desperation and a hint of panic. Fix what? I charged back, my voice rising. This mess you created, more lies and deceit. You think this can all be washed away without reckoning? The din in the room shifted once again. Where confusion had reigned just moments before, a renewed alliance sparked among my family. I saw the determination gathering in their depths. They would not falter in front of him. With a roar, our mother finally shattered her silence. Enough! The weight of her voice ground the room to stillness, her eyes blazing with tears as the truth crested over her anger. How could you betray us like this? How could you think that gambling and deceiving everyone could ever be okay? As he stood there, visibly shaken and stripped of his bravado, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. He had masked his true self for far too long, and now, like fragile glass falling to the floor, it was shattered. Everything lay bare. At that moment, I felt like I was reclaiming my place among my family, recovering the harmony he had almost destroyed. The bond forged in this conflict would only grow stronger as we faced the chaos together, and the echoes of my stepbrother's downfall would reverberate through our shattered safety net. Weaving together the jagged edges of our family, the aftermath was nothing short of tumultuous, the echoes of betrayal still reverberating through our small house in Maplewood. The once familiar walls felt charged with a new energy now that my stepbrother had been stripped of his false grandeur, a shining armor that had shielded him from the harshness of reality for too long. As I stood in the living room, surrounded by the simple comforts of my family, I could almost feel the weight of his absence. It was like a storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh clarity. The air was lighter, the sun shone brighter through the window, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I could breathe without the heaviness that he had imposed on all of us. "Can you believe it? He's gone for good," I said, half laughing, half sighing, as my mother sat across from me at our worn wooden table. The stains from countless cups of coffee and the grooves worn through the surface from years of use were testament to the struggles we had faced, but now they seemed almost like battle scars, symbols of our victory. My heart felt lighter, but there was also a raw edge of caution. Had we truly won, or was it just the calm before another storm? "You deserve to feel relief, Ella," my mother replied softly, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of pride and sorrow, reflections of the journey we had gone through together. "But remember, we still have work ahead of us. We can't let ourselves drift too far into complacency." I nodded, absorbing her wisdom. There was so much to do. Our finances were in disarray, directly from the shambles he had left behind, but together we could mend what was broken. "Absolutely. I don't ever want to let that kind of chaos back into our lives. We need a plan." I leaned in closer, the adrenaline of our newfound independence buzzing in my veins. "Let's sit down tonight after dinner and go over everything. I want to know where we stand. I want to rebuild." My mother smiled, a soft and determined smile that felt like fuel to my fire. "I'll make your favorite dinner, chicken with mashed potatoes." I could feel my stomach rumble at the mention of it, the dish taking me back to better days when our laughter filled the kitchen, drowning out the noise of our troubles. "And maybe, just maybe, it will be a good occasion to celebrate a new beginning." Yes, that sounds perfect. My enthusiasm was infectious. The kitchen would be filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals as we sifted through our bills and bank statements, taking inventory of what we still had. It sounded daunting, but it excited me even more. I pictured us working together, the music playing softly in the background while we talked and laughed. I could see the strength in my mother, who had fought fiercely for our family, as we made plans for a brighter, simpler future. "Breathe, Ella," I whispered to myself, the shadows of doubt clawing at the corners of my mind even as I battled to focus on what truly mattered. The mess my stepbrother had left behind felt like a looming storm cloud whispering fears of failure. What if we couldn't recover? What if we never moved past this? But just as I began to spiral, I caught sight of my mother's face. She was looking out the window, watching the neighborhood kids play outside, their laughter wafting through the open window like a song. I could almost see her remembering a time before the lies had shattered our family, a time like the moments I had recently cherished with her, when we had come together to root out the deception and reclaim our lives. "We will rebuild," I reminded both of us resolutely. "And no one will take that away from us." The following days felt like a delicate dance, reestablishing the rhythms of our life without the toxic presence of my stepbrother. I stepped cautiously into the financial mess that lay before us as we began sorting through the paperwork that had accumulated like dust under the bed, hidden away from view for far too long. I was surprised at how my knowledge of household budgets and expenses had grown over time, each lesson learned building a strong foundation upon which I could stand, unflinching and resolute. "Okay, here's what we have," I said, spreading out the receipts on the kitchen table like a map leading us toward our future. "We might have to cut back on some things this month, but if we stay focused, we can get back on track." My mother's brow furrowed as she read through the figures. "We can't let fear dictate our decisions. We need to be smart but also hopeful." Her wisdom reverberated in my ears like a gentle reminder that wealth or possessions were merely tools, not the essence of who we were. That night, when I slumped into bed, I felt the soft fabric of my pillow enveloping me in comfort. Though the exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, I remembered the look in my mother's eyes when we had shared our plans. I felt a swell of gratitude for her strength and the knowledge we were forging a bond deeper than any material possession could offer, a bond built on resilience, love, and absolute survival. I was no longer just a daughter. I was now a fierce protector of our legacy. As days passed, I began to notice the ripple effects of our actions in the community. My stepbrother attempted to emerge from the shadows of his disgrace, but the family outcast was met with cold shoulders and whispering tongues. I witnessed him walking down the street, hands shoved deep into his pockets, head bowed, the vibrancy of life stripped away. A shudder ran through me as I observed the consequences of his greed and betrayal. Each time he stumbled, a part of me felt the satisfaction surge back, like watching a storm that wasn't as powerful as it once seemed, but I quickly extinguished that flicker of malice. He was no longer my concern, and I had no desire to wallow in his misfortunes. "You okay?" My mother asked one afternoon when she saw the distant look on my face. I had been staring out the window, momentarily lost in thought. "I just wonder if he regrets it," I replied, my voice more worn than I intended. "If he's realized what he threw away, the family he cast aside for money, will he ever understand?" My mother shook her head slowly, a frown of sympathy gracing her features. "Sometimes that takes losing everything to see what is truly valuable," she explained. "And sometimes, people never see it at all." Her gentle words grounded me, filling the empty spaces in my heart with the understanding that his journey was separate from ours. As the months rolled on, I reveled in the small victories. I reveled in the simple joys we cultivated, like gardening in the backyard, picking fresh tomatoes and herbs that would transform our meals into something extraordinary. I cherished the way laughter flowed freely, filling our home, echoing through the hallways, and spilling out into our garden like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Together, we began to create a legacy built on these moments instead of dollars and cents. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I sat on the back porch. My mom joined me and sat beside me in the creaky old swing. "This was wonderful, Ella," she said, her voice warm and soft against the cooling evening air. "I'm so thankful we have each other. We've faced the storm and come out stronger." "I feel it too," I responded, glancing at her. "We've rebuilt and we're no longer living in fear. This life, it's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." She smiled, and the radiance of it filled me with joy. "And we will hold it close, protect it fiercely. Love is what binds us together." In that moment, I realized my life had transformed into something fierce and unyielding, a passionate defense against the chaos that had once threatened to undo us. My stepbrother was a cautionary tale now, a reminder that all the wealth in the world could not replace the value of loyalty, unity, and the love that defined our family. I had taken a stand, not only for myself, but for us as a whole, waging a war that had brought us peace, a peace that held no place for greed or betrayal. As the cool evening breeze wrapped around us like an embrace, I took a deep breath, surrendering to the warmth of my mother's presence beside me, knowing there would be no more shadows lurking in the corners of our lives. We would create a simple, genuine future together and step forward as true guardians of our legacy.